Hi, I'm Pastor Michael Schmidt. Welcome back to Summer Bible Study. Today's the day, James chapter 2, verses 14 to 26, the famous faith without works is dead portion of the chapter. I think normally when we are thinking about this part of the book of James, we really only think about one verse. Verse 17. So also faith by itself, if it does not have works, is dead. And we kind of just sort of leave it at that. We don't really take into context anything else. But today we are going to take into context this and review this entire section here, verses 14 through 26, because it all does kind of build on this. It's not just a standalone verse. It is build up, which actually began last week with verses 1 to 13, and now continues this week with 14 to 26. So again, we do want to take this verse in context, and if you have thoughts or questions, certainly feel free to contact me, and if we miss something or gloss over something or something gets a little jumbled, let me know, and we can go back over and review that next time. But today we will be working through 14 to 26. We're going to take it in its sections, though. The first section is verses 14 to 17. What good is it, my brothers, if someone says he has faith but does not have works? Can that faith save him? If a brother or sister is poorly clothed and lacking in daily food, and one of you says to them, "Go in peace, be warmed and filled," without giving them the things needed for the body, what good is that? So also faith by itself, if it does not have works, is dead. So James, writing this to the church, to the believers, presumably again at Jerusalem and in the surrounding area, he writes this, and this is before Paul. So kind of one thing we want to keep in mind is he writes this first, so he's not reacting to Paul and what Paul will write later, particularly in Romans. So he is writing before Paul. And I think he's writing this to the assembled, to the congregation. But he's also kind of writes this as a hypothetical. Just like we saw last week with the seating arrangements in the worship service, sort of draws this hypothetical, which isn't really a hypothetical. Maybe somebody could actually imagine this happening, so he does so today. There's sort of a hypothetical here. Suppose someone did this. So we're kind of jumping ahead of ourselves here, but verse 14. What good is it, my brothers, if someone said this, not necessarily a particular individual in mind or someone that's standing right there, but suppose someone said this. Someone says he has faith but not works. Is that possible? Can you have faith but then not do any works? And can that faith that you have without doing any works, is that enough for salvation? I mean, that's the ultimate thing here, in some church bodies, the question is, have I done enough works to be saved? If you're saved by works, then it's a valid question. You never know if you've done enough. So how do you know if you have done enough or haven't done enough? So that's kind of the question put forth. Can a faith without works save? And then he draws this example here. Again, a hypothetical. If a brother or sister is poorly clothed and lacking daily food. Poorly clothed could mean naked, or it could just mean someone who is sort of in rags. Someone who is not dressed neatly. Someone who's dressed, almost their clothes are torn. They're dirty, they're tattered, maybe they don't fit quite right. They're poorly clothed and hungry. So if you see someone who is poorly clothed and who is hungry, what do you do? Well, I think obviously the answer is, you feed them. You give them some food. You give them some clothes. You help them. And that is what our faith calls on us to do. But if you don't do that, what's the scenario? What's the situation? If you see someone poorly clothed and lacking daily food, and you say to them, "Go in peace, be warm and filled," well, you haven't really helped them. You haven't done any good work. You're faithful, but you have not done a good work. You have not fed and clothed them. All you've said is, go in peace, be warmed and filled. Well, be warmed and filled with what? It's kind of a insulting, ridiculous statement to make. Be warm and go in peace. Kind of what we say at the end of the service, or what kind of a biblical religious version of goodbye. You tell someone goodbye or go in peace. You don't want harm to come upon them. You want God's favor to rest upon them. Be warmed and filled. Well, be warmed and filled, but I'm not going to do anything to help you bring that about. So really, what good is that? It's kind of someone has a tragedy in their life. You say, sending good thoughts and positive vibes. What does that mean? What does that mean? Thanks for your good thoughts and vibes, but we need money, we need clothes, we need food here. We don't need good vibes and thoughts. Our prayers go up to God, but then we are also called upon in our faith to go and help that neighbor that is in need. So Paul is saying, not Paul, James. James is saying, if you just say, go in peace, be warmed and filled, be warm even though you're naked, be filled even though you're starving, it's like, what does that even mean? How is that helpful? Without giving them the things they need for the body, what good is that? You can say these things, you can wish these things, you can speak these things and pray these things. But to the person in need, what good is that? And so he writes, faith by itself, if it does not have works, is dead. Our faith moves us to help people. It moves us to give to those in need. To give money, to give food, to give clothes, to give our time, our talents. This moves us to do these things. We are moved by our faith when there is a tragedy to immediately ask, what can we do to help? And it doesn't matter the tragedy. Our faith moves us to say, what can we do to help? Well, if you hear of a tragedy and you think, oh, that stinks. Too bad. What have you done to help? You have said, go in peace, be warmed and filled, and walked away. Our gospel text this Sunday is the Good Samaritan. And the priest and the Levite who walked by on the other side may have said a prayer, but what does it do in that moment? Yes, we should pray, we should definitely do that, but there's also the next step of, I pray for you, let me help you. The Samaritan is the one who comes along and perhaps doesn't pray, but does help. Faith by itself, if it does not have works, is dead. Faith produces good works. It produces fruits. And in fact, we're going to see later that when it says faith without works is dead, it's faith without works is fruitless, is useless, it's fruitless. It is Jesus sees the fig tree and it does not bear fruit, he curses it as a metaphor for Jerusalem. Jerusalem is the fig tree that does not bear good fruits. It does not bear fruits for the harvest. It does not bear fruit in keeping with the faith. And so he curses it. What good are you? Yeah, you're there, you're alive and well, but you don't produce good works, good fruits. You're of no use. You're worthless. What good are you? And he curses it. So here, it's not enough to say, go in peace, be warmed and filled, to the family that is hungry and naked. They need, in the moment, they need real assistance. They need the gospel. They also need food and clothing. Faith, when it sees someone in need, creates this urge inside of us to help someone, to reach out to that person. So the next section is verses 18 and 19. Someone will say, you have faith and I have works. Show me your faith apart from your works, and I will show you my faith by my works. You believe that God is one. You do well. Even the demons believe and shudder. So again, he's talking to a hypothetical person. Someone says this. Someone might very well say this. You have faith and I have works. So you have faith and no works. I have works and no faith. That is the challenge there. That's the challenge that is proposed to James, that James creates here. That someone says, you have faith and I have works. And James' response is, show me your faith apart from your works, and I will show you my faith by my works. You can kind of imagine this when you're baking a cake. Or you're baking something, or making something, and you mix the ingredients together. Like, okay, I have flour and I have sugar. I have these two things, and I'm going to mix them together as part of my recipe to make this. Well, here's faith, here's works. When I mix them together, you can't sort of undo it. Unbelieving people can do good works. There's no benefit for them. There's really kind of no reason for them to do it other than, some inner sense of responsibility or patriotism or whatever. They have this gnawing sense that they need to do something. But people of faith do good works because this is just what we naturally do. We have received the love of Jesus. We now desire to go forth and show that love of Jesus to others. And we can't take it apart. There's no point where our faith ends and our good works start, or our good works start and our faith ends. It's all melded together. It has formed itself into one piece. You can't sort of go through and pick out the pieces again. So you can't really separate them out. So it says, show me your faith apart from your works. Show me your faith without doing any works. When we talk about works, what can be a good work? Works is kind of an open-ended term. Helping your neighbor is a good work. But then also living the Christian life is a good work. Bringing your children up in the faith is a good work. Which means, bringing them to church, coming to church, doing devotions. Even in the catechism, when we talk about the fourth commandment and caring for children and children honoring their parents, children obeying their parents is a good work. Parents are called to take care of their children. Parents making dinner is a good work. You are doing a good work because you are taking care of the child that's been placed under your care. These are good works. You are doing these. And you're doing them, your faith is motivating you to do them. And we can't really separate the two. I can't show you my faith without doing good works. I can't do good works without incorporating faith. So James is saying that these are really just joined together. They're molded. They're melded together. Like that recipe, they're mixed up, they're all together. If you take different chemicals and combine them, they sort of form a new chemical, they form metal, or form these things. You can't really take them apart. You can't draw it back out. Once it's in, and it affects everything else that results from it. All right, you believe that, verse 19, you believe God is one, you do well. This is a good thing. You believe God is one. You believe in God. This is good. This is what we want. We want faith. Faith is good. As opposed to the demons, they believe there is a God. They just don't believe that he has any power. They don't believe that Jesus saves. So the demons believe, but they shudder. They shudder in terror. But this is a distinction the commentary made pretty strongly. That's I don't think we normally think of in these terms. That we believe in God. We have faith in God. We have saving faith. The devil knows there's a God. You might even say he believes that God exists. But he doesn't believe that he's all-powerful. He doesn't believe that he can, ultimately, that he can defeat Satan. That is what Satan believes. When we say even the demons believe, we saw this with a couple weeks ago in the gospel text. Jesus sends the demons into the hurt. The demons are afraid. They don't want to go back to hell, but they are afraid of Jesus. So he says, well, send us into the swine, into the pigs. And he sends them into the pigs, and they drive themselves into the lake, and they die. So the demons believe there. They believe Jesus has power. They just don't believe he has power, that much power to defeat Satan. So there's a distinction there in belief. But for the one making this argument, you believe that God is one. You do well. He believes in God. He has faith in God, saving faith in God. This is good. That should produce good works. Good works are a result of faith. We'll see this more specifically in the next section where this plays out. But having faith, believing in God, should produce good works. It's kind of, you hear the gospel, you just can't keep that good news to yourself. You have to share it with someone. It overflows, it spills out. There's no point where it doesn't have some effect on your life. So faith without works then is dead. If that good news does not overflow and spill out and touch others, it's like it must be dead. It's not doing anything. It's lifeless. This is kind of an illustration it makes at the end of the chapter about, separating faith and works, and separating is kind of like trying to separate the spirit and the body. You can take the spirit out, but then the body's dead. You can take works out, but then faith is dead. Faith absolutely should produce good works. That's just naturally what it does. That's how it works. So the final section then is verses 20 to 26. Verse 20, do you want to be shown, you foolish person, that faith apart from works is useless? Was not Abraham, our father, justified by works when he offered up his son Isaac on the altar? You see that faith was active along with his works, and faith was completed by his works. And the scripture was fulfilled that says, Abraham believed God, and was counted to him as righteousness. And he was called a friend of God. You see that a person is justified by works and not by faith alone. And in the same way was not also Rahab the prostitute justified by works, when she received the messengers and sent them out by another way? For as the body apart from the spirit is dead, so also faith apart from works is dead. So James now takes two examples that would be very familiar to Jewish people. Abraham would definitely ring a bell in their minds. Rahab plays a significant role in the conquering of the Promised Land back in the book of Joshua. These are names that would show up in they would know. These are not obscure names. This is saying George Washington and Thomas Jefferson, and not necessarily pulling out, an obscure name from the Declaration of Independence. This is bang. Here are two names. You know them. We know them. Now, why these two? These two actually have some very interesting parallels between the two of them, and you kind of don't really connect the two. They're separated by a good number of years. We've got the time in Exodus. We've got Abraham dies right before, kind of right before the Joseph story really kicks off. He dies before that. He dies actually well before that. He kind of dies right when Jacob and Esau kind of do that birthright exchange for a bowl of soup. And then, so he dies back then, and then the spies don't enter Canaan until much later on. So they're separated by quite a bit. Not just in terms of books in the Bible, but they're separated by a good span of history. But they do have some comparisons. Abraham and Rahab both have pagan origins. Abraham's father is a pagan. He's an idolatrous pagan. Rahab was a Canaanite. She was a pagan. They're called to faith. God calls Abraham, and then Rahab kind of knows these spies and knows that God has given the land of Canaan into the hands of Israel, and she begs for mercy. They both entertain visitors. This one's a little bit of a different one, but Abraham, entertains the two visitors that come to his house, and they tell him, when we return in a year, Sarah will have a son, and then actually God stays with Abraham, and the two others go off and destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. Rahab hides the two spies that Joshua sends to scout out the land. She hides them, and she actually sends the Canaanites, the king and his men, away in a different direction, and sends the spies out and says, "Remember me." So they both have these sort of interesting parallels in their lives. So James is talking about faith apart from works is useless. He draws Abraham here. The example then is Genesis 22. Abraham is told to sacrifice Isaac, and Abraham follows through, and he's about to sacrifice Isaac. The knife is ready to pierce the skin of Isaac's chest when the angel says stop, and Abraham goes, and there's the ram caught in the thicket. This is a experience of faith for Abraham. It is to strengthen his faith, to build his faith. So he is strengthening and building up his faith. And this is declared to him, Genesis 22 says this. Abraham believed, and it was God, and it was counted to him as righteousness. So this work that he was willing to do is counted to him as righteousness. Abraham believes, and it's counted to him as righteousness. This work, he could only do this work of nearly sacrificing his son because of his faith. His faith was so strong and so great that he was willing to sacrifice his son, Isaac, and when he shows that he's willing to go through with it, it is then counted to him as righteousness. Kind of Abraham gets points in the bank because he has done this work. So faith is active along with his works. He knows when they're going up. There's kind of debates on what Abraham knew and when Abraham knew it. But he tells Isaac, God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering. That Abraham knows God will provide somehow. He might provide Isaac, but then Abraham believes that God can raise Isaac back up from the dead, or that somehow, somewhere, they're going to come across an animal, and God's going to say, okay, kill that one instead. So Abraham knows something is going to happen. So he believes God and is counted to him as righteousness. Is that his work justified him. His work was a work of faith. He could only do that because of faith. Rahab the prostitute also justified by her works when she received the messengers and sent them out by another way. Again, her faith, primitive as it was, knew that something was up and that these were men of God, that God was working here, and that by taking in these two messengers, which is actually kind of interesting here. The Septuagint calls them messengers, which is the tie back to Abraham and the three visitors. They are called messengers in the Septuagint. And here again, they're called messengers, as opposed to being called spies here, which they are normally called. So she takes them in and shows her faith by taking in these spies, hiding them, and then sending them out. And as a reward for her faith, her family is saved. So again, these works are only able to be done because of the faith of the individual. And verse 26 here is kind of what I alluded to earlier. The body apart from the spirit is dead. This is the Genesis 2:7. God breathes into Adam's nostrils the breath of life. So not the spirit or soul that leaves our body and go to heaven and waits the resurrection, but this is a living spirit, a life spirit, life-giving spirit. The spirit of life, the breath that is breathed into Adam's nostrils. The body is just a corpse. It's just a thing without that spirit, without that breath. Once you take the breath out, the body's dead. So also faith, apart from works, is dead. If you take the faith away from those works, the faith is dead. The faith needs works to grow by, to build off of. Your faith is built. A lot of people, they go on mission trips, national youth gatherings coming up. These are, they're the mission trips. Go and build a house or teach a VBS or English classes. These are means by which faith is strengthened. These are works by which faith is strengthened. And people who go on them and then come back, they say that these change them. They come back different people because their faith has grown and been strengthened that much. National Youth Gathering is coming up next week. This youth will go, and we pray that their faith is strengthened and that they come back different people. That being in this event, this experience, strengthens their faith, builds their faith, so that they can come back, and that this work has strengthened and heightened their faith. Doing devotions, receiving Lord's Supper, these are all things that works that build and strengthen your faith. Helping a neighbor can strengthen your faith. You can go out and help that neighbor, clean their yard, fix their house, take them a meal. You come back, you're strengthened. You're a different person. You're a different person because your faith has molded you, refined you, cleansed you, purified you just a little bit further. If you just sit at home and say, well, I have faith, I don't need works, well, your faith is going to just decay. It's going to shrivel up and shrink and die. That's what happens to faith that is not nurtured, that is not fed, that is not strengthened. It shrivels up and dies. When you don't come to church, when you don't receive Lord's Supper, when you don't do any devotions, your faith dies. Your faith is dead. So, James writes here, the body apart from the spirit, the body without breath is dead. So is the same with faith, and apart from works. Your faith is dead without works. So, what about thief on the cross? That's the one that always gets brought up here. What about the thief on the cross? Okay, two things about the thief on the cross. Number one, you're not the thief on the cross. You are not the thief on the cross. Yes, this kind of goes with Mark 16:16. Whoever believes and is baptized will be saved, but whoever does not believe will be condemned. What about the infant that's not baptized? What about that guy that was going to be baptized, was on his way, but got run over by a truck right in the middle of the highway just as he was about to go into the church and be baptized? Okay, those are extreme circumstances, and we allow for God's grace and mercy in those cases. That yes, the thief on the cross, he was dying. He died shortly after he was saved. He didn't have time to go and organize a fundraiser for the sick and the needy. He didn't have time to go and visit the homeless, to clothe and feed the hungry and naked. He didn't have time to do that. He didn't have opportunity to do that. He was on a cross. He was dying. People that make deathbed confessions, yes, you're right. They cannot go out and do a bunch of works. But they have faith. And so we commend them to the grace and mercy of God, trusting that He welcomes them into His kingdom. You, however, are not the thief on the cross. And I'm assuming most people watching this video are baptized, and they have been baptized for a very long time. So that means that the thief on the cross example does not apply to you. It might apply to someone, but does not apply to you. So, works strengthen our faith. Now, works without faith are pointless. Faith without works is dead and hopeless and pointless. Faith with works is where your faith strengthens. So this means you need to go to worship, you need to hear the word, be strengthened by the word, and feed your faith that way. But then when you go out throughout the week, that faith overflows, and you desire to love and serve your neighbor in many and various ways. You want to help your neighbor. So that faith is strengthened and made strong and secure. That faith grows. And when your faith grows, the works grow. When the works grow, your faith grows. It all ties together. Abraham could not have done the sacrifice of Isaac when he was 75 and God called him out of the land of Ur to go to the promised land and claim it for his own. He could not have done it.